Okay, I'm waiting for it just there. The recording has started, and I'm going to turn it over to Amanda.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our October monthly webinar. Come on, there we go. It's actually going to be a very short webinar today. I attached a PowerPoint the PDF of the slides to the Outlook appointment, so you should have it. Just a couple reminders of things to look at right around now. One aspect of assessment that I'd like to talk about, and then discussing volunteer classroom aides. So it'll be a short webinar. So regarding grants, this is the beginning of a new grant cycle for all of the direct service grants except the Section 243 IELCE grants. So that means there has to be a new contract, which means when you resubmit, or originally submit, but when you resubmit your grant, you need to make sure the authorized signatory completes the sign and submit step using e-signature if you have one. We have had several grants submitted with someone other than the grant signatory doing the sign off, and we have to return it to you again because the wrong person signed off on it and we can't move forward with that. So make sure when you are resubmitting the grant that the appropriate person, the person who has e-signature, number one, is still the authorized signatory. So if you have an executive director who has left, but that person still has e-signature, do not use that person's e-signature. You'll have to use the print and sign option. But if your authorized signatory has e-signature, please use e-signature to have them complete the sign and submit step. That makes everyone's life easier with e-signature. If your authorized signatory does not have e-signature, then when you complete the sign and submit step, you'll have to do the print and sign option, and you need to make sure that you type in the name of the authorized signatory, the person who will be signing it, not the person who's, if you have a grants person who submits it on behalf of your executive director, that grants person can't use their name. They have to use the authorized signatory's name. As a reminder, if you're a community-based organization, unless your board has given someone else authorized signatory and has a documentation that you can submit to us, you have to have two signatures on it, president or vice president and secretary or treasurer. If you're doing print and sign, please wait until you are contacted by Lori Bratcher or me that your grant is okay and that you should submit the signed signature page. Otherwise, if there are still errors, we have to return it to you again and you have to sign it again, or your signatory has to sign it again. If you do print and sign, has to be signed in blue ink, and you can scan the signed signature page in color and upload that to the grant, and we can use that to expedite the submission process while you mail in the actual signature page. Okay, so that's grants and signing grants. Fiscal reports. This is just a review because we still get questions. And as a reminder, there's section 613 in the guidelines, provides information about the financial reports. There is a division quarterly expenditure report. It is due Monday. That is submitted to the division. And in that, you are reporting expenditures in support of our grant funded activities. All grantees must submit division quarterly expenditure reports for all grants each quarter, whether you've actually received funds or not. You know, and most of you have not so far this quarter, but you've still expended money. So you're letting us know how much did you have to expend in order to support the programming that you are providing under the grant, and that you will later charge to the grant funds when you receive the grant funds, right? So you're reporting what you actually have expended to us. And it's part of our tracking allowability. It's part of the federal risk analysis. It's floors and ceilings and all those kind of things. The other report that you have to submit, if you have received grant funds from the Commonwealth in that quarter, is the reconciliation of cash on hand report. That is the one that your agency submits to the controller's office, or comptroller's office, however you prefer to pronounce it, in the FAI system. The division is not involved in this report at all. And as the title says, it is reconciling the cash that you have on hand. So basically, it's a comparison of how much grant funding, how much of the grant funds you have already received versus how much you have expended. And if your agency receives significantly more than you expend at some point in the quarter, the comptroller's office automatically reduces your payment amounts. Conversely, there is a way, if you have received significantly less funds than you have expended, there's a way to request, additional payments through that process. So that one is submitted through the FAI, does not involve division staff. It is cash received versus cash expended, and you only submit it if you have actually received funds, grant funds, current year grant funds in the quarter. So most of you will not be doing a reconciliation of cash on hand in this quarter for, prior to Monday, because most of you did not receive any grant funds in July, August, or September, right? So if your people go into FAI to try and create it, I don't think you can even create a report if you haven't received funds. So that's the difference between the two. Division quarterly expenditure report, you're telling us how expenditures to support the activities, whether it's coming from local funds right now to support your program while you're waiting for your grant funds, or if it's grant funds if you receive them. And then reconciliation of cash on hand goes to the comptroller's office through FAI, and just like how much money have you gotten versus how much money have you expended. And if you haven't gotten any, you don't submit it. So regarding assessment, if you have not already done so this year, please take time to review policy D100, adult learner assessment, with your staff, and really look at the assessments that you are using with your student population to determine if they are appropriate for the students and the services you are providing to them. You may need to consider adding an assessment to the options that you are currently using. For example, many programs use the CASAS Reading Life and Work with English language learners. And that's appropriate for many of them. Many of our English language learners are still learning how to read in English. And so a reading assessment is appropriate for determining some of their needs and progress. However, we have students who, have been in our programs or come from, backgrounds where they have very strong literacy reading skills, or they may just have strong passive English language skills. I don't know about some of you, but if you learn a foreign language, very often your passive reading is by far your strongest skill, because you can take time, you can kind of figure out from context, but you have other skills that you want to work on. And many of these students want to work on their speaking skills. So you give them the CASAS Life and Work reading, and they place out of ESL. And so what many programs are automatically doing is turning around and giving them the TABE reading, the TABE language, or the CASAS reading goals. But if they're not working on reading, if they want to work on speaking, those assessments aren't appropriate for them because they're not going to be able to show any gain, right? So if you give someone a TABE language, but you're not working on the skills associated with the TABE language, they could be making great strides in their speaking ability, but you're not going to be able to document it because you're not using the appropriate assessment, really. So that's why we've approved the Best Plus. That's why it is one of the approved assessments on our list, because that's the best way to show progress for individuals who are working on their English language speaking and somewhat listening skills. So, if you have a large ESL population, especially individuals who want to work on their speaking and you're not using the Best Plus, sitting down with your team and looking at it and, figuring out, maybe we need to implement this. And as a reminder, you can use multiple assessments and they don't all have to be from the same series. Right, so you can use CASAS with some students and Best Plus with other students, things like that. So, but we have gotten some questions about, how, or frustrations from individuals saying, well, we can't, we have these students who are working on their speaking, but, we have to give them the TABE. Well, no, you should probably be giving them the Best Plus.
We have a question in the chat.
Yes.
Wanting to know about using BEST for conversational English classes.
I think that's what I was just clarifying. I'm not sure. If I'm understanding the question correctly, that is in fact what I was talking about, right? If you have people who are working on their conversational English, then the Best Plus is, no pun intended, the best assessment to use with them because it is designed to test oral skills. Whereas something like the TABE reading or the TABE language is not designed to assess progress in a person's speaking skills. So if you have students who are working on their oral skills and not also working on some kind of, academic reading, understanding proper, grammar and punctuation and things like that, TABE reading and language wouldn't be appropriate for those individuals. And they've also placed out of ESL based on CASAS Life and Work or Best Literacy. Best Plus would be the assessment to use with them.
The person who asked clarified that they had typed the question too soon and that you did answer their question.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. No more questions on that one?
Not okay. Now. No.
So, volunteer classroom aides. Act 143 of 1986, which is the state law that authorizes our state adult education and family literacy funding, requires that the state use at least 20% of the state allocation that goes to adult education for training of volunteer instructors. Okay, that's a requirement. We are supposed to use 20%. So we get this year and the last 12 years, we've gotten $11.675 million. We have to use 25% of that for family literacy. And then the remaining 75%, we have to take 20% of that and use it for training volunteer instructors, tutor training. So in the prior grant cycle, so the one that just ended, the division chose to pull 15% of that 20% and reserve it for what was called the optional tutoring program portion of the 064 grants, which only went to very specific agencies. Only certain agencies got it. And then we retained 5%, which we put into the state 064 funds for programs to support volunteer classroom aides. For those of you who were here prior to that grant cycle, you know that we told all adult ed grantees, 064 grantees, you had to use 20% of your state funds for a volunteer tutor program. Many programs struggled with that. They couldn't find tutors. It wasn't enough money to support a tutor trainer, things like that. So we recognized, and people came to us and said, you know, maybe we don't need individual volunteers, but we have people who want to support us in the classroom. We have volunteers who want to help in the classroom, but they don't want to be a one-on-one tutor. So we said, okay, a portion of the state funds, in order for the state to meet the 20% requirement, a portion of the state 064 grant, instead of having to have a tutor trainer and one-on-one tutors, you can now have volunteer classroom aides. This time around, for this grant cycle, we actually decreased the amount that was set aside for tutoring program for adults. And we took that difference and we put it into your state 064 grant. So I've heard some complaints that like, oh, you made us spend more money on volunteer classroom aides. That's not the case. We gave you the money to increase the amount that you spend, okay? Because you got more money in your state 064 grant, because we took that additional, the money that is no longer going to tutoring programs, that's separate tutoring program for adults grant. We took that, we put it into the formula for state funds that 064 grantees could receive. So that's why we increased the amount of the state 064 grant that you need to use for volunteer classroom aides to 10%. Now, another change that we made regarding the volunteer classroom aides is that instead of having a separate tutor coordinator to work with the aides, you can use those funds, the funds in 1692, that 10%, to in part to support the in-house professional development specialist to do the initial tutor training and to provide ongoing support for professional development for those aides, right? So instead of having a separate person who only works with tutors, your in-house professional development specialist can now work with those volunteers, and a portion of that, and that time that they're spending with the volunteers can be charged to 1692 and be part of that 10%. The other thing that we realized in doing monitoring and talking to programs is, you know, it does require time for a teacher to work with a volunteer. You know, if a teacher has an aide working in their classroom, the teacher needs time to, one, prepare the resources that the aide will use, and also to support and prepare that aide to do the work. So we have said that 1692, you can use a portion of those funds to pay the teachers who have classroom aides to work with the aides before the classes to prepare them for the work the aide will do in the class. Keep in mind, you can only charge instructor time to 1692 when the instructor has a classroom aide and is working with that aide to prepare them for a class and to work with students in the class. This is not just additional prep time for the teachers. This is time for the teacher to work with a classroom aide and prepare that aide to be able to support the students that they will be working with, or provide whatever kind of supportive services that they're providing within the class. Another change that we made is that volunteer classroom aides must have at least a high school diploma. And I'm not sure, I don't remember if that was a change or not, or its equivalent, and have the content knowledge to effectively support students. Okay, so I think one really interesting possible volunteer source would be your program graduates, right? I'm especially thinking about, many of you say we have English language learners who've placed out of ESL. They're not really interested in working on their more academic language that would be associated with the ABE activities, but they want to work on speaking. So you have conversation classes, but even those are kind of limited in how real they are, right? But if you have non-native speakers of English who could be volunteer classroom aides in your other ESL classes where they're working with the teacher, right? So the teacher is working with them to help them prepare to be classroom aides. That is, real life English language conversation that has meaning and is helping them develop those skills. You may even have non-native speakers of English who have very strong math skills, and maybe they could be a volunteer classroom aide in a math class with native speakers, which would allow them, again, to really work on their language. That may not be appropriate in every program with every graduate, but I think that would be great. And if you have someone who took and passed the GED test, maybe asking them to come back and being a volunteer classroom aide in one of to support students, especially in one of the sections that they felt strong in on the GED test. You know, that would be great model for the students who are still in the classes to see, hey, here's someone who went through this program and was successful. And, now they're helping me so I can make that progress. So I really think that, looking at program graduates and people who have been in your programs and moved on successfully, I think, not all of them will be interested, of course. Many of them will have jobs and they won't have time. But, seeing if you can recruit some of them to be volunteer classroom aides. It sounded like there were a few questions, Christine. I just heard some beeps.
No, I don't.
No? Okay.
I
It
don't
may have
see
been
any.
people coming in and leaving.
Yeah, for some reason it's set up that I have to let people in now. Oh,
Oh,
okay. And now we do have a question.
okay.
Um, are we still able to have one-on-one tutors who work with individuals if we don't specifically have a tutoring grant? And if so, are they still required to have a bachelor's degree or has that been changed to diploma as well?
We want you to use the 10% for volunteer classroom aides, but you may also have one-on-one tutoring in addition to that. You'll need to read. So if you are providing one-on-one tutoring with the 064 grant, you need to read Appendix F of the guidelines, because as long as they are providing one-on-one tutoring and, they have to meet whatever the requirements are for community-based tutors in Appendix F, which I don't have memorized and I don't know off the top of my head. I don't remember. Let's see, hold on a second. See if I can bring up the guidelines. Okay, did I just cover up the slide and show you my,
Yes, we're
okay,
seeing
so
guidelines. We're
everyone,
seeing
here's
guidelines
the
and policies.
guidelines and policies page. We still have to get the most up-to-date policies on on this page. There's a freeze on updating information right now because there's some switch going on for Commonwealth websites. But here are the guidelines. Here are the fiscal reports, page 43. There you go, fiscal reports. And then at the very end, Here we go. Okay, they must have volunteer tutors provide one-on-one or small group instruction. They must have at least a high school diploma, its equivalent, and the content knowledge necessary to provide high quality instruction in the content areas they are teaching. So there you go. But yes, you can provide tutoring services with your state 064 grant. And that's it.
Another question. Are
Mhm.
classroom aides required to provide 12 hours during the PY to count as an aide?
I don't think we have any minimum requirements, no.
But can I
Yeah, I
jump
mean,
jump in here
yes,
and
go
say
ahead.
that if you are investing training and time um, in a classroom aide, I would hope that they would commit to more than 12
Right.
hours of service.
But what I'll say is that, like the 12 hours, so with a volunteer tutor doing one-on-one instruction, the 12 hours is required because the student needs 12 hours in order to be a participant, in order to be an enrolled student. We don't, there isn't any such thing as enrolled tutors or enrolled classroom aides. But yes, I agree with Christine's statement. If you're going to take time to invest in them, you want it to be someone who can make a commitment.
Another question, completely different subject. Can I unmute? Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Sue Klauser. Unmute yourself.
Good morning, everybody. Amanda, I had a question about the match verification form. First of all, I really like it. It's super user friendly, and the way that I'm using it is at the end of every quarter, I'm filling it out, putting all the dates we were in locations, and then asking the facilities folks to sign off on it by quarter. Is that acceptable? And should I be sending these signed forms into my advisor at the end of a quarter?
So off the top of my head, that sounds acceptable. And advisors correct me if I am wrong, but I believe the idea is you just retain those forms locally and we will look at them when we monitor you. That you don't have to submit them. We were not requiring them to submit them as part of the quarterly reports, were we?
Correct.
So yeah, it's what happened was we heard from a lot of, we go to programs and we say we want to see documentation of your local match. And a lot of programs have tracking sheets to track it, but there's not documentation to back that tracking sheet up to say this is actually happening. So we figured for those of you who don't have a form, this form would be useful. We actually found it from another education. It was either education or Department of Human Services federal grant that used that form. So we took that and adapted it. But it is so you have something locally to document it, and we'll look at it locally during monitoring. And what else? What I'll say related to that is some programs already have forms that they use. Say if someone has donated time to do something, if you had somebody volunteer come in and work on your computers or something, you already have a form to document that. As long as it has the same information, similar information on it, that's okay. You can continue to use that form. This is just for agencies that didn't have anything to use or for other local match that maybe you didn't have a form for.
Amanda, I just wanted to add to that. When I did send that, I had been using a figure that, I thought was the, correct figure for classroom usage. And when I sent the verification form to one of our sites, they were like, "Oh, we actually increased the cost of using the classroom So it actually created a little bit more match. So
There you
go.
go.
It was good. It was a good thing.
That's always nice, yes. That, and of course, and this I'm saying for everyone, especially when it comes to space usage, the ideal is for that entity to say to you, well, normally this is what we would charge for space usage. We're either giving it to you for free or we're giving it to you, you can use it, we'll charge you to use it once a month and then the rest of the time we won't charge you, things like that, for them to be able to actually say to you, this is the value of the space that we're giving. If they can't do that, you need to look at the fair market value of similar space. And you can use that to calculate the value of the space that you have been given. But what I'm going to say is if you're in a church basement somewhere, you're not using the the market value of class A office space penthouse level, right? You're going to find what is the value, what is the square footage rent of similar space in a similar type building. I realize it wouldn't be a church basement, but if it's an older church that doesn't have air conditioning, you're not going to want to pick the newest office building in town, the CEO suite, and what the square footage is for that. You're going to want to find a building that is a similar type building and find out what that square footage would be. Okay, well, if there aren't any more questions, I'm done. Hope everyone has a lovely fall.
Yep, there's nothing in the chat. So thanks for joining, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Great afternoon.